Also, you have a scene you're underwater, but I was like, oh, I don't know, maybe it's CGI or something, but you told me...
Let me tell you, nothing in this movie is CGI. Like,
that's not true.
There's not a lot of CGI. There's a couple, and some of the CGI is shit in this movie.
Us understands the importance of good visual effects.
I don't know how you do that. Some computer weenies somewhere up in Northern California figure this thing kind of out.
Good afternoon, Alan.
Does that look real?
In that particular shot, no, actually.
But the funniest thing is people saying, it must be so weird to see it with all the VFX now. Isn't that weird? And I'm like, well, yes, they did add some flying monkeys and some animals. But these were really practical sets that we were so blessed to be a part of, yes.
It's no secret that the appetite for heavy CGI productions has fizzled out faster than an overpriced theater soda. It wasn't long ago that all you had to do was throw a single action-heavy explosion shot in your trailer, or have a couple A-listers show up on screen, and bam, box office hit. But that's no longer the case. These days, CGI is about as popular as J-Lo. In fact, there's a clear disdain for it. Film and TV enthusiasts on the internet are loudly proclaiming that practical movies back in the day were so much better, that CGI is ruining the art of cinema. Content creators can't help themselves to compare the best of old CGI to the blunders of today. And even worse, actors, directors, and the press are all pandering to their audiences by downplaying the use of CGI in their movies and instead singing the praise of their practical work. So naturally, as VFX artists, when we hear actors out on their press junkets bragging about how everything was built practically and there's barely any CGI, while watching trailers and breakdowns that clearly demonstrate an immense amount of CGI set extensions, character work, and effects simulations, we can't help but feel that Hollywood is lying to you. There's no shortage of YouTube videos all with the same hot take. Look at Davy Jones from 2006. Now look at this abomination of a shot from today's blockbuster, claiming that CGI has regressed and we should just throw it in the trash. All of it, the whole industry. And on the surface, it seems like they may have a point. Technology has advanced greatly since then, and yet these shots from modern Marvel movies feel off. And that's just the thing, it's usually hard for any one critic to actually pinpoint what's off about it. And we often only really ever notice CGI when it's bad, or when it's so obviously CGI because it would be impossible to do otherwise. The thing is, most of the time, the issue isn't even with the CGI or the VFX. The assets themselves and the integration of the CG alone is usually pretty solid. The real culprit usually starts with the poor vision of the directors and other shot callers way up the chain. More often than not, the issue starts with a design choice and then snowballs from there with a lack of vision, poor planning, lack of an appropriate budget, and an insurmountable volume of work. MODOK looks questionable because the idea of stretching a person's face under the visor of a giant goofy-looking pill-shaped potato was never something that was going to translate well to CGI to begin with. Doctor Strange's third eye is a tough thing to pull off because having a third eye on your forehead is just odd. It's like putting a hat on a hat, and the eyes are the first thing that we look at, easily triggering the feeling of uncanny valley, so naturally you're gonna feel some kind of way. Cats looks a little rough because they literally decided to go with
human-animal hybrid,
and their production delays and time crunches got ridiculously out of hand. Look, there are definitely cases where studios have to sacrifice some quality in their films because of time and budget constraints, as I'm sure was the case with Black Panther's floaty animation and this infamous Black Widow shot. But it's so disingenuous to say that practical always holds up better, or that CGI is getting worse, while cherry-picking the rush shots of today and comparing them to the best from the past. As if there weren't any rushed effects back then that don't hold up, or as if there's just no great CGI anymore. Sure, it's true that we've been oversaturated with CGI content and we've come to expect great quality, seamless and visible effects, and we're a little bummed when we can tell that once again computers were used to do what used to be a person's job. But rest assured, real people are behind these CGI effects, and it takes a lot of time and effort to make. And while some might pat themselves on the back for pointing out that the transforming robot aliens, backflipping superheroes, and literal fire-breathing dragons are CGI, they might have completely completely missed that the entire background environment, flying smoke and debris, props and clothing elements, crowd characters, and so much more are also entirely CGI. We all know Jurassic Park looked great. Good design choices, keeping things in the dark, hiding details and specular reflections by adding rain, selectively using CGI instead of practical when it was better suited. But then we had Dragonheart and Spawn around the same time that don't hold up as well. Around 2001, it feels like every filmmaker watched the jaw-dropping visual effects in The Fellowship of the Rings and collectively decided that CGI could basically do anything. And so around that time, directors got a bit experimental, and we got a barrage of questionable-looking characters. Davy Jones is obviously incredible, thanks to very talented artists, I'm sure, but also due to clever planning, and I'd assume a better budget and timeline to get the work done, and honestly, probably even a bit of luck. But I Am Legend and Tron, not so successful. So yeah, as expected, we've seen a few rougher looking shots in the last decade or so, but we've also witnessed some mind-blowing work. And there's no way in hell you're going to convince me that the Planet of the Apes would look better today if it was all done practically. I've seen CGI being used as a scapegoat for anything post-production related. Many times when discussing a film with someone, they say the CGI was bad. After a bit of prodding, I'll quickly realize what they really mean was that they didn't like the editing, or the character design felt funny, or even that the color grading or the shot lighting was off. Things that are just straight up not CGI or VFX for that matter. The general public has no idea what VFX or CGI is and how it works.
What the fuck do 3D artists actually do?
Like there's just this magical make it beautiful button we press and all the work completes itself. Hell, I'm not even entirely convinced some of my own clients don't think that. Then you'll notice game cinematics made with Unreal Engine come out and the public celebrates how far CGI has come and how incredibly realistic it is, without realizing that offline rendering in films achieved that level of realism over a decade ago, and that today's films are still fairly significantly ahead of game engines. I've even noticed the same trend with AI these days. A demo that's been loosely started with some AI prompts but then massively massaged and altered by teams of artists, and the general public in shock reacting as if, quote, one artist sitting at his computer just pressing a button can do all of that by themselves now. No, they can't. Not yet anyways. The truth is, most people are blissfully unaware of the insane amount of data flowing in and out of VFX and animation studios. There's a serious amount of technical management and artistic skill involved in wrangling thousands of shots, with many rigged characters, each with their own many deformations, cloth and hair simulations, and volume and geometry caches, and projections, and render farm jobs, and EXR layers, and attributes, and metadata, and light rigs, and HDAs, and the list goes on and on. Despite our names being shoved at the bottom of a long list of credits, there's an incredible amount of hard work and creative skill involved, thousands upon thousands of man hours and care put into every sequence that ends up on screen. But that goes completely unnoticed to the general public. And look, maybe I'm a little biased as
computer weenie
myself, but it does feel a little reductive to perpetuate the myth that movies using practical effects are somehow innately better, and that the use of CGI is objectively bad to begin with, that CGI was somehow just better before, and that artists today are somehow less skilled than the ancient floppy disk pixel wizards of the past, when it's just objectively not true. When it comes to actors falsely claiming that everything was done practically, I doubt there's any malicious intent. It's more likely just ignorance. When they show up on set on these multi-million-dollar productions, there's a good chance that they'll be working on these immense, super impressive sets that look and feel very real. And when they finally end up seeing the final shots, with all of its invisible effects, the average person or actor probably can't tell that there are massive CG extensions added on, or entire sections completely rebuilt, and other effects that embellish the practical in very significant ways. And that's probably a testament to how seamlessly integrated into the shot the CG is. So yeah, the common misconception is to assume that it was all shot in camera. And on the surface, that's all fine and great. Thanks for the compliment. You can't even tell that our work is there, and much like a janitor, you can tell our job is done well when it goes completely unnoticed. The problem is that the studios push actors during press junkets to maintain the illusion that it was all shot practically, because that's what sells, while conveniently downplaying the really hard work of thousands in the process. As H. Bomber Guy so eloquently put it, you neglect your precious life and connections to finish a shot on time for Marvel so Taika Waititi can poke it with his finger and go, does this look real? During these interviews, actors speak with such conviction and authority that of course you're inclined to believe it. They sell it so well. I'm almost convinced Emilia Clarke was riding a real dragon, or that they shot Wicked in Oz for the tax credits. And to them, it feels genuine. As long as they weren't monologuing to a tennis ball in front of a blue screen, it all feels real. But as an artist working on these films, it can be a little disheartening to hear your painstaking work get minimized in front of millions of people. I've been on the flip side of that coin myself not long ago with Top Gun Maverick, where I worked on the project for months only to discover that it had all been captured in camera and I was just having a really lucid fever dream. As VFX vet Todd Vaziri has pointed out on multiple occasions, there's a kind of repeated pattern that you'll notice when it comes to promotion of these VFX-heavy films. Step 1, pre-release featurettes get released championing the use of practical effects and production design while loosely implying or outright stating that no CGI was used in the film. Step 2, social media hype builds up, with articles and comments echoing that no visual effects were used, perpetuating the myth. Step 3, the movie's released, clearly with hundreds of VFX and CG shots, and lists hundreds of artists in the credits having worked on the film. Step 4, once the dust is settled, studios give permission to VFX studios to discuss their work, debunking the myth that there was no CGI in the movie. But at that point, the damage is already done. The general public has been lied to and believed that the movie was done practically, reinforcing their misguided belief that practical is better than CGI, downplaying the work of thousands of VFX artists and studios in the process, while profiting from it. If you believe that shooting practically is somehow more noble than using CGI, if you've somehow been led to believe that some recent blockbuster was all shot practically, just know that chances are that you've been fooled, duped, hoodwinked, bamboozled into believing that about a film that's definitely relying very heavily on VFX and probably even CGI, and that whether something is built out digitally or practically, both take a very similar approach, where things need to be built out from scratch by monstrous teams of technicians and artisans that are incredibly skilled at their crafts. To be clear, if a modern movie were released without any effects, it would be borderline unwatchable. And I'm not only talking about big budget tentpole superhero films. Your average rom-com these days has enough VFX work to keep an entire studio busy for months, with wire removals, matte paintings, object paintouts, set extensions, screen replacements, actor de-aging, and much more invisible effects work. And before I start sounding like a broken record, echoing everything that Jonah has already said on the matter in his very insightful No CGI series on his channel, The Movie Rabbit Hole, I'm just gonna leave it at that for now, and suggest that you go watch it if you haven't already. I'm just scratching the surface here. He's got receipts and everything. Look, CGI is better today than ever before, obviously. And it's only ever bad when there's a lack of planning and prep ahead of time, poor decision making along the way, and overly ambitious egos with a lack of budget fueling the project. And if you're interested in finding out more about the issues that we face in VFX that lead to these outcomes, feel free to watch our other video delving into the topic. And if you're the type to go around commenting on any new movie trailers stating that all the sets are practical, that CGI is so much worse nowadays, or that real directors only use practical, then maybe, I don't know,
stop saying shit like that